10 años para acá, Vygotsky ha cobrado mucha relevancia, y yo sé que tú tienes una mirada mucho más centrada en la problemática de Vygotsky, pero que hay también muchas otras visiones que parten de esa idea, pero bueno, hay una discusión, un debate que yo sé que tú eres una de las personas que está en ese debate, pero yo tendría dos preguntas. ¿Crees este interés en Vygotsky? ¿Y cuáles son las grandes dificultades que tiene el retomar a un pensador? Creo que psicólogo es muy poco para Vygotsky, pero a un pensador, ¿cuáles son las dificultades de retomarlo en nuestra época, en nuestros espacios, en nuestro tiempo?
Well, maybe I'll begin with the second question and come back. I think that will help lead us to an understanding of the first. One of the things that makes Vygotsky's work difficult is that it's written in Russian, of course, and the translations are often very inadequate. Vygotsky started his work really in 1924, and it was a period of great political upheaval, of course, after the Russian Revolution of 1917, but it was also a time at which the Stalin bureaucracy was beginning to gain control over the whole political system in the Soviet Union. And Vygotsky based his theory on the methodological approach of Marx and Engels, which is another reason that it's difficult for people who are not familiar with Marx and Engels, which is a great portion of the world, including those people that live in countries that claim to be, or did claim to be, based on Marx's ideas. It makes it more difficult to understand. Marx's theory is very complex as well, but Vygotsky was using Marx and Engels' methodological approach that they developed. They applied that methodological approach to the study of human society, and the approach they used, dialectical materialism, is a general overarching philosophical approach that can't be applied directly to the matter that's being studied. And so what is necessary is to develop an intermediary theory that's based on categories and concepts that grow from the matter being studied. So Marx and Engels, studying human society, came up with concepts like value and exchange value, commodities, class struggle, means of production, relations of production. And the Stalin bureaucracy, or those people who were studying psychology, who were influenced by Stalin's approach, tried to take that historical materialism that Marx and Engels developed to study human society and apply it to the study of the mind. And Vygotsky said, that doesn't work. You can't do it that way. And he said, what we need to do is to look at the mind, the human psyche, and he looked at the psyche as the unification of the brain and the mind. And it's important, I think, to keep that in mind while we talk about the mind. It's really, he always is talking about the brain and the mind that making up the human psyche. And so he said, in order to study the human psyche, we need to look at the psyche and develop categories and concepts that are relevant to the thinking process, to cognitive processes, and develop a concept of meaning. And he looked at the relationship between language and thought, the relationship between the mental functions, and this is where he differed quite a bit from other psychologists who, even though they looked at consciousness as unified, they still would study the individual mental functions, perception, memory, attention, as isolated phenomena, and then try to pull them together. Vygotsky, on the other hand, said that what is key in studying the psyche is looking at the interrelationships between the mental functions. And those relationships change. And when they change, it changes the whole character of consciousness. And that's where he looked at the different stages. They were fundamental changes in the interrelationships of mental functions. And so that was his basic approach, which came under attack from the Soviet bureaucracy. They claimed that it was an idealist approach because he was dealing with language, and language, they said, was not material, even though Marx and Engels and German ideology talked about language as being sound waves, which was material, and so there really was a material basis for it. But his work came under attack, and then what was suppressed for 2 years after he died in 1934. And from 1936 until 1956, it was impossible to get his work. You had to get permission from the KGB to even go and read his work, so nobody did. And then with the Khrushchev revelations, his work was rehabilitated, and people started then to look and say, well, who was this man? And someone with whom he had worked, who was one of the group of people, was named Leontiev, who broke with Vygotsky in the early 30s and developed a theory that was antithetical, in my opinion, and this is where the debate comes in, antithetical to the basic theory of Vygotsky. Leontiev's theory is known as activity theory. And when Vygotsky's popularity, people started looking at Vygotsky with great interest, Leontiev took over the mantle of Vygotsky and said that he was a Vygotskyan, and then started to interpret Vygotsky's work. And so a lot of the Western world, well, the Russian, a lot of the world is looking at Vygotsky's work through the lens of Leontiev. And these lenses, in my opinion, are distorted. And so the essence of Vygotsky's work has been lost. There's also a great problem with the translation.